Hello, everyone. This is the Ask the Expert session for Microsoft Mesh, and we hope you've enjoyed the awesome set of content that we've enabled for you with respect to Microsoft Mesh today, starting right from Satya's keynote, leading on to the Ignite session, the featured session on Microsoft Mesh, and also a Microsoft Mechanics segment on Microsoft Mesh. If you haven't caught any of those, we'll have links to them towards the end of this Ask the Expert, so stay tuned. I'm Nishant Tucker. I lead technical product management for the mixed reality and machine learning portfolios at Microsoft. And in this session, I'll play the moderator for the Ask the Expert session over here. Now, just getting through some of the housekeeping on how you folks can engage with us with respect to the Ask the Experts. So you can see on your team's channel, you see a chat function. So you can use that to ask questions to our panel of experts. And then once the moderator, in fact, alongside me, there are a few others who are looking at these questions as well. Once we approve those, they would be visible to all the attendees. So be careful of what questions we are asking. Let's not bring in any kind of confidential information, which is not supposed to be published externally. And of course, for the interesting questions amongst them, we'll ask them on camera to the panel of experts, and they can answer them as we go along in this session. And as we look at some of these, we'll also look at providing you with some resources to point to in terms of more information, etc. Okay. But before we get started, just wanting to make sure that everybody understands that this session may be recorded. And then please help us by not spamming or posting inappropriate comments in the chat, needless to say, but just making sure. And then adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. If you've not seen this before, just making sure you get to see it over here. I'll keep it here for a few seconds for us to be able to read it, but the key point over here is that we seek to create a respectful, friendly, fun, and inclusive experience for all participants. So let's just keep that in mind. And then we do not tolerate disruptive or disrespectful behavior, messages, images, or interactions by any participant or in any form. Okay, so let's just refrain from doing anything untoward. And then, of course, Microsoft also does not tolerate harassment or discrimination based on any of these categories, whether it's age, ancestry, color, gender, identity, expression, national origin, physical or mental disability, religion, sexual orientation, or any other characteristic protected or applicable by local laws, regulations, and ordinances. And we will also respect if you can refrain from doing any kind of photography, video, or recording of the session content or presentations in any format which you intend to share, because this is an Ask the Expert session. We'd like to keep it pretty transparent and answer questions as they come along. And then if you need any help with respect to any of these aspects, you have this number to reach out to or this email address to reach out to as well. Okay, so just making sure that everybody is aware of it. All right, now let's go to our panel of experts over here. Hopefully we can introduce the panel starting from Nahil. Nahil, can you introduce yourself here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nahil Sharkasi. I'm the executive producer at the Commercial and Consumer Studio. We're the experience studio for HoloLens, and my team built the Microsoft Mesh app, which you can download now in the store for HoloLens 2.
So glad to have you join here, Nahil. Next up on our panel of experts today is Kevin. Kevin, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Semple and I am a program manager on the developer platform team. I spend my time focusing on the mixed reality toolkit and how it can be used with Microsoft Mesh. So excited to talk to you all today.
Thanks for joining us, Kevin. And of course, Doreen, you're next up. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. My name is Doreen. I'm a senior program manager on the Mesh team. My focus is overall platform development and roadmap, so I'm absolutely looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Thanks for joining us, Doreen. And I also want to put a shout out to the folks who are behind the scenes helping us with questions. So thank you, Kelly, Ian, Marcello, and Pink, who are joining us to answer a bunch of questions that you will post in the Q&A chat over there. Okay, so with that, let's just get started, and I will keep the kind of engagement metrics up, slide up over here for us to know what to do. And as we start with our questions, I'll pick a few from the list that the moderators forward to me, and we'll pick a few that we have in hand from some of our preview customers as well, so that we can mix and match on the questions for these Ask the Experts over here. So I think the first question that's been forwarded to me is around like the platform, the mesh platform itself, and the kind of environments that it supports. So Doreen, do you want to take that one and kind of talk us through what are the languages and frameworks that are supported by the mesh platform today?
For sure. Right, so we talked a little bit about how we want the hardware for Mesh to meet you where you are in terms of what you have available. And it's a very similar philosophy to how we're approaching the platforms that we also support. So in the featured session, we demoed our Unity engine integration, which we believe a fair amount of HoloLens developers are already familiar with. But we're also looking at creating SDKs for native C# developers, right? So not necessarily Unity developers, C++. We're looking, longer term at Unreal support, for example. Simon mentioned something about webs and browsers, and we'll maybe touch on that a little later. But the idea is that if you're building a collaborative experience, independent of your background or toolchain, you should be able to build something for Mesh.
Lovely. Thank you, Doreen. I think the next question that I have would probably go to Nahil. Nahil, this is a question from one of our preview partners, and their question was, as we look at creating apps like the Mesh app on HoloLens, what is a good workflow to follow, and what are some good practices that you would recommend for developers trying to create these kind of experiences on Mesh?
Great question. So I think the biggest, difference that you'll experience in your workflow as you're developing a collaborative application versus an application that, a single user uses on their own is just the combination of different use cases and edge cases and different things that can go wrong. Your test matrix kind of explodes. So you want to make sure that you have capacity and plans built in whenever your developers are making changes and checking in code that they need other people to test with. And so it becomes much more of a team sport. And so you want to make sure that you've, got that team in place. What we've done as we've developed the Mesh application is, we got together much more frequently as a big group and as a team to test out the collaborative features in a lot of different combinations in one-on-one sessions and small groups and large groups to make sure that we were really seeing the full range of capabilities and exercising all the code paths that are now open in the collaborative world.
Lovely. Thank you, Nahil. Kevin, I have a question for you here. Does familiarity with the mixed reality toolkit development in Unity translate well into using the Mesh SDK in Unity? And what are the key differences between using Mrtk and Mesh with Unity? And of course, Doreen, please chime in as well.
That's a great question. Simply put, the answer is yes. If you are already familiar with the Mrtk, then you'll be able to leverage some of the prefabricated examples that we've created using the Mesh SDK. That means that you can leverage all of your learnings from Mrtk, hand interactions, user experience components and UI, and you can apply all of that Mesh SDK to your Mrtk projects. So we really focus on accelerating that development time so you can focus on building your experience as opposed to the underlying workings of Mesh SDK. Now, if you want to get into that, you sure can. You can build apps with just the Mesh SDK if you want to focus on things like avatars and such yourself, but we believe that the best experience is using Mrtk with the Mesh SDK.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Another question that's coming across, and preferably this one's for Doreen, is like, would we be supporting devices such as Vive and Index, since there are a lot of these devices in the market today?
Yeah, and that's also a great question. All these are good questions, actually. We do believe that a wide device matrix is critical to the success of Microsoft Mesh. And so while we're not necessarily ready to roll out into the universe with here's our exact platform matrix, please know, or exact device matrix rather, please know that we are testing many VR headsets which are outside of the normal Microsoft purview. So not just WMR or Windows Mixed Reality headsets, but other devices we see very commonly in the market as well.
Love it. All right. And maybe another one for you, Doreen. How does Mesh work? Can it be used in schools?
Yeah, I mean, Mesh is what you make of it, right? It is the entire goal is to get two people with some kind of mesh-enabled device together in the same space. And so actually in the featured session, we did actually mention a university that is thinking about Mesh for educational experiences, right? They had a week to send people home with devices to teach medical school. I could imagine very much that this same type of technology could be used in other applications as well. For example, I actually teach a computer science class for high school students, and I find myself going through the school year wishing that I could have an avatar, in a virtual classroom instead of teaching over, the technology of your choice. Because I think being able to make eye contact in an education setting or having that body language is so incredibly important to communicating facts. And so, long answer to be very short, yes, you can use it in schools.
Love it. All right. Nahil, the next one's for you. As we look at the first experiences of Mesh on HoloLens, is it applicable to HoloLens 1 as well, or would it only be for HoloLens 2? And if it is exclusively for HoloLens 2, why is that so?
So the Microsoft Mesh app is right now exclusively on HoloLens 2. And the biggest reason there, you might have seen this in the keynote or other sessions, is that we're really taking advantage of the HoloLens 2's expressive capabilities, articulated hand tracking and eye tracking. If you noticed, our avatars have much more expression, which is really key to creating that feeling of presence. And those features are exclusively available on HoloLens 2.
Lovely. Thank you, Nahil. The next question's around the availability of the Unity kit and the timelines towards that. Doreen, do you want to take that one?
For sure. So the Mesh SDK is currently in private preview, meaning that we have a small but steadily growing group of developers who are building on top of the platform. And with that feedback, we refine the platform, we fix bugs, you do all the standard pre-release sort of stuff. And we are looking at, over the next couple of months, taking on a couple more human beings. If you sign up for the mixed reality news and updates at microsoft.com/mesh, that is one of the sources we look at when considering taking on new partners. And then any public availability or other such updates we'll announce at a later time.
Thanks, Doreen. I think there's an interesting question over here, what type of integrations will exist between Teams rooms or Surface Hub and Mesh. Example like ingest of Teams content, camera or whiteboard into Mesh, and in the other direction, including Mesh holographics and Teams rooms versus holographic or 3D projectors in that space.
Yeah, great question. So what's interesting about Mesh is that we actually utilize a lot of existing Microsoft infrastructure to build it out. For example, our data and consent infrastructure is built on the graph. We use Azure Active Directory for authentication. And actually, when it comes to a lot of our telephony capabilities, think video or in some cases audio, voice especially, we do use a lot of the infrastructure from Teams itself. And so what we're currently examining now is how do we take advantage of that to really form this integration between you as a third-party developer building a very vertical application and potentially integration with things like Teams. And so while the extent of the details is what we announced at the keynote today, it is something we're actively thinking about. And if you have specific scenarios, we would love to hear from you about what those scenarios are.
Love it. Thanks, Doreen. This one's from one of the stock from our preview customers, and this one's for you, Kevin. As we look at developing apps using Mrtk and the Mesh SDK, how long does it actually take for a developer to go from scratch to a production-ready app with Windows or mixed reality?
Awesome question. So we saw in the demonstration earlier that Doreen was able to spin up an app in only 10 minutes, which is amazing to see. Now, some of the things that you might want to consider that will vary in time when developing an app in your own environment are some of the more back-end aspects. Setting up your connection with Azure and making sure that you have everything in place for that connection to actually work. And it's a little bit tough for me to say how long that would take in your own environment, but when it comes to actually creating the experience, we are providing you with examples and prefabricated scenes in Unity so that you can get started very, very quickly. So I challenge you to try and beat Doreen's time of 10 minutes.
Awesome challenge for the audience here, Kevin. Thanks for the answer. Nahil, the next one's for you. I think people are asking, how do we look at the Mesh app for HoloLens and AllSpace VR? Are they different flavors of the same sort of activity, or are they meant for different purposes? And what's the background behind having both of those apps?
Good question. So today, they are built for different purposes. We have the Microsoft Mesh on HoloLens 2 application, which is really meant for collaboration among HoloLens users, which are primarily first-line workers in the manufacturing, engineering, aerospace, medical fields. So for folks who use HoloLens on a day-to-day and need to collaborate with other people who are on a HoloLens or on a different device. AltSpace is available across all platforms and is much more geared towards larger events and has much more capabilities for general meetings and general social, consumer, and enterprise collaboration activities. Now, since they're both built on the Mesh platform, in the future, we can definitely think about bringing these two activities together. You have, if you've noticed from the coverage, you have the same avatar system in both applications. We're looking at the same graphs and the same building on the same Microsoft 365 capabilities across both applications. And so we will look at that roadmap as we move forward. But today we have the Microsoft Mesh app on HoloLens 2, exclusively on HoloLens 2, and AltSpace across all other devices.
Lovely. Thank you, Nahil. Nahil, just to follow up on one of the previous questions that we asked you about the Mesh app being available on HoloLens 2 only, but how about the Mesh SDK? The audience wants to know if the Mesh SDK can function for apps in HoloLens 1 as well.
I think that's a great question for Doreen and Kevin, but I think the value prop of Mesh All Up and the SDK is to connect across devices, but I think Doreen and Kevin can give more details.
Yeah,
Doreen, you want to add to that? Yeah.
Sure. So right now, full transparency, a lot of our energy is currently spent getting Mesh working on HoloLens 2. And this is just because I think we mentioned earlier, hand tracking and gaze, all of that, we really do believe bring an incredible bonus to avatars in these collaborative experiences. We don't have much of an update about HoloLens 1 SDK support at this time, but if you are interested in using Mesh on a HoloLens 1 application, please do reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Doreen. Guys, I think there are a lot of questions around a common theme over here with respect to holoportation. We've seen a bunch of capabilities being shown as part of like the demo in Alex's keynote, and we've seen a bunch of those being shown in the videos that we've released. So is it just the vision, or is that a reality today with the Mesh SDK? Could one of you take that one?
I can start, and then I think Nahil, you'll probably have some commentary once I finish speaking. But when we think about embodiments, so embodiment meaning, here's how I represent a person, we think about it on an X and Y spectrum. So on the X spectrum, you have degree of realism, and on the Y spectrum, you have expense. And expense is not necessarily dollar bills. It's, the expense of setting up a space, or the expense of, setting up hardware, just like general complexity of the solution. What we show you with avatars is maybe a little bit down into the left on the quadrant of realism and complexity, right? It's easy to set up. You can pilot it with any device, but it is maybe less realistic than what you see with holoportation. The holoportation you saw in the keynote today was actually built with the Mesh SDK, right? So this is, real working code that our team is actively developing. I will say it is perhaps, a bit more exploratory than some of the work that we're doing with avatars, and so we're actively engaged with a couple of partners on making sure that this works very well. But we look forward to sharing details on roadmaps and updates at a future time.
Yeah, from the experience perspective, I mean, holoportation is a very it's an impressive and compelling piece of technology, especially when you see it in a head-mounted display in a HoloLens or a VR headset. It is really remarkable. For us, as we move forward and think about how do we best apply this technology for HoloLens users, it really depends on the use case. When we look at frontline worker scenarios where the ability to move around a space and have that heads-up, hands-free freedom, like imagine workers on a manufacturing floor who need to walk around the equipment and navigate the space, or you're in a warehouse or a facility or a construction site, the freedom to move about and express your body language in three-dimensional space across space is really the value add. And so holoportation is maybe like the avatar representation is a better fit over the holoportation. However, in a use case like the keynote or other meetings where someone's personality and very nuanced expression is really the important thing in the meeting or the collaborative session, then holoportation is a great fit. And it's just really striking that balance between, as Doreen said, the setup time and constraints and the kind of expression and collaboration and communication you are looking for in the session.
Lovely. Thank you, Nahil and Doreen, for that clear explanation on this. Kevin, I have a question for you. There's a gentleman in the audience who says they are from the support industry and they're excited to learn about Mesh and they don't have any developer background. So where should they start, and what would the learning path be like, and are there any prerequisites to them getting to learn Microsoft Mesh with its SDK and the Mrtk?
Yeah, if you are new to mixed reality development, I think the best place for you to start is actually learning the Mrtk first. The Mrtk is an open source, Microsoft driven toolkit that allows you to accelerate your immersive app development. In fact, MRTK stands for Mixed Reality Toolkit. If you go to your browser and you type in aka.ms/learn-mrtk, you'll be taken to a tutorial that actually tells you what all of the necessary prerequisites are, all the software you need to download so that you can get started today. Now, if you don't actually have a headset, you can use the HoloLens emulator on your computer. That way you can get started simulating hand movement and eye gaze on your computer and try out these tutorials that are made for people just like this question asker who don't have any type of mixed reality background and are new to this type of development. Once you've got your hands firmly gripped around the MRTK, it's time to jump into the Mesh SDK once it's made available. Now, this journey is one that will allow you to really show off some of those ideas that you have in your mind. So I'm really looking forward to see what you create with the MRTK and Mesh SDK.
Lovely. Thank you, Kevin. There's a question around like the maturity of the Mesh platform, and Doreen, maybe you can take this one, where gentleman asks, like, if we were a large enterprise organization, how should we think about Mesh? How mature is it, and where did it come from, and where are we going with Mesh?
Right. So what's great about Mesh is that we build on the shoulders of giants, right? Like I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. As we've been developing the platform, we've really just been begging, borrowing, and stealing components from across Microsoft, putting a layer of mixed reality specific secret sauce on top, and then shipping it as a private preview to customers. In terms of maturity, I think the definition of maturity really depends on your company, on your needs, on the security aspects you need, and there's a reason why we're in private preview. It's because we're working towards those things right now. That said, we do have developers in our private preview actively building on these components with experiments that they're working with inside their organizations today. So, we'll get more mature over time. We are functional, right? And I look forward to be able to share more details about availability and maturity, at some point in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Doreen. The next one's around like the capabilities of user identity with Mesh. And the question pertains to, do all users of a Mesh application require Azure Active Directory login?
Yeah, so a user needs to be known by Microsoft in some way. And that could be either you are logged in with a MSA or a Microsoft account, which is what you would normally use to log in as a consumer into things like Outlook.com or Xbox Live. Or you need to have at least something in an Azure Active Directory tenant. So either your users are either directly in the tenant itself, perhaps you federate your on-prem tenant through AAD in some way, or we think up some in-between solution between all of that. But we do require today that you do be hooked up to the cloud, especially when it comes to your identity, because the rest of our ecosystem or the rest of the Mesh SDK does require internet access.
Lovely. Thank you, Doreen. I think the next one's for both of you, Nahil and Doreen. Nahil, first, you from the perspective of the Mesh app for HoloLens, like there's a lot of data that's being transferred. How do we think about data security with respect to using such apps? And is there like a local server version of the app as well as the platform that can be made available for users or enterprises to build secure apps?
Great question, and I think the best way to answer this is to quote Doreen that we stand on the shoulders of giants. So the Microsoft Mesh app is built on the Mesh platform and Microsoft 365 platform. So we leverage identity. We would leverage services like OneDrive as well for importing 3D content. And when you use the application, we follow all of the same security consent and privacy consent guidelines as all Microsoft products. So we are as secure as the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem, so customers can trust that if they're using the Mesh application on HoloLens and importing content through their OneDrive, it's like using any other Microsoft product. Regarding the SDK, I'll let Doreen also mentioned this, that we do require like cloud access and internet access, so we don't have an on-prem solution for the application at this time. And Doreen can speak to on-prem solutions for the SDK.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered that, right? The current thinking around Mesh is really to focus on nailing the cloud-powered scenario first, and then seeing over time how that translates to on-prem, right? And so I know there are many of you in this audience that are like, but I have a hybrid solution, or I'm on-prem, what are you doing? And I know we're sorry, we're thinking about it. We're trying not to design ourselves into a box where we cannot go on-prem, but we do not have anything to share about on-prem support right now.
Now, thank you, folks. I think we are on time over here, but there are a lot many more questions. So don't worry, we'll get to all of those questions in the offline chat Q&A and try to answer as many as we can before we log off. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining in for this Ask the Experts session. I want to leave you with some resources over here as well. So if you want to kind of continue your learning journey, there are mixed reality modules on Microsoft Learn, so you can go to aka.ms/learn@ignite. And then if you haven't watched the mesh mechanics session, you can go to aka.ms/mesh-mechanics. And then if you're interested in joining the mixed reality developer program, just go to aka.ms/iwantmr. And you should be able to join the program over there as well. With that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in, and a special thanks to the panel and the rest of the team helping answer a bunch of questions in the back end. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day ahead, and see you at other sessions with Ignite.